Thank you so much, Sophie. In Veld, we have today this MEP from the Netherlands. She's from Renew Europe, and she's been very active in all the negotiation with the European certificate. So I'm sure she knows very well the topic we are going to raise today, which is like the European certificate, and especially this green pass that a lot of countries are imposing or putting in place. So I would like to start with a very broad question. A lot of countries, more than 20 in the European Union, are using this green pass beyond travels, just to go to cinemas, restaurants, cafes. So I would like to know your general assess on this measure. Do you agree with that?
Well, the regulation, the law that we adopted says that if countries want to use the certificate, the EU digital COVID certificate in that way, they can do it, but they need a proper legal base. And that means that every country would have to pass national legislation. And I have the distinct impression that many of the countries that are using it for national purposes have not passed such legislation. So it is for the European Commission to actually monitor if they are complying with the law. But my biggest difficulty is in what the member states are doing is not even this. My biggest difficulty is that they are basically ignoring that there is a European Union, that there is Schengen, that there is an internal market, and each country, despite the EU COVID certificate, each country is imposing its own rules. And I think that has left citizens in what I call the spaghetti of rules and restrictions, not knowing, do I need to be vaccinated when I travel to country XYZ? What happens if I come back home? Do my children need to be tested? As of what age? Do I have to quarantine or not? I mean, people are completely lost, even I. I'm working in the area. I'm going to travel on Monday, and I don't know exactly what to expect, and that is something that I really resent. I think the member states should have a common approach, a common European map with color codes, and also let's say a common protocol. What happens? What do you do? What kind of restrictions do you impose for a red area or a green area or a dark red area? I think that is a bigger problem.
And we also have another problem with people here in Europe, in general abroad, but we are talking about this situation here in the European Union with people who don't want to be vaccinated. So there are a lot of, we are already witnessing a lot of protests in France, in Italy with this certificate, because there are many thousands of people who say that this health pass, the European certificate or the green pass, are discriminatory. So do you understand this point of view? And do you think this measure is somehow an attack on their fundamental freedom and rights as they plead?
Well, it's a difficult one, because if you refuse to be vaccinated, you can then spread the disease to someone else. So you're also affecting somebody else's fundamental right to health and to life. The problem is, I don't think we should be making a legal debate out of this. It's not a legal conflict. And I think if you take a step back, it's not the first time that we're trying to kill the virus, quite literally, and to stop the spread by using vaccines. It's not the first time. And we have actually in previous with previous epidemics and previous vaccination campaigns, we have managed to convince people on a voluntary basis. Not in all countries, I realize that, but in my country, for example, it's voluntary, and we reached a vaccination rate of 95%. So I think that would be the preferred strategy, to convince people, not to force them, not to oblige them, but to convince them. I can see the logic. I mean, if in certain sectors, for example, in homes for the elderly, for example, or hospitals, something like that, I can see that there would be a very good reason to oblige people to vaccinate. But still, I think it really should be the last option. Try and talk to people. And what we see now is that a lot of this resistance against vaccination isn't even so much to do with vaccination itself. it's a broader political issue, because we see all sorts of extremist or anti-establishment, far left, far right organizations which usually, have nothing in common. We see them now coalesce around this issue of vaccination. And I think the more we push, the more fuel we're going to give them. So let's try first to talk to people. For example, we see in many countries that the stories of people who refused to be vaccinated, but that ended up in hospital, they are actually very good ambassadors of vaccination, because they have learned the hard way. And they are going around telling their friends, look, I was stupid. I didn't want to be vaccinated and I ended up in hospital and I nearly died. It's not a joke. The virus is not a joke. So let's use them as ambassadors. I mean, I think there are many things we can do without actually forcing people.
Yeah, the European Union is actually reaching nearly like the immunity health here in general. So are you confident that it's not going to be needed to put vaccination compulsory? I mean, how can we convince, if not with science, like this few percentage of the population who will refuse in general when we will reach like this immunity health?
Well, if it's only a few percent, then we're
I
fine.
hope so.
But no, I again, you have to have a local approach, and every country, every system has its own traditions. But if I see how the resistance is growing under pressure, I'm not sure that's the right approach. And I do think, I mean, we haven't seen any massive protest against the measles vaccines or polio vaccines, or there are all the other vaccines that we're all taking, which are so much part of our life. Nobody's even discussing it anymore. So if we manage to convince people to do that, then why should we not be able to convince them to take this vaccine? And I think ultimately, in the long run, it works better if you convince people with arguments.
Yeah, there. Like I've been following the European vaccination broadly, and it takes my attention that there are some countries such as Bulgaria or Romania who are like in around 20% only of the population, and then we have other like Spain, Germany, Netherlands, like around 60%. So why is it happening here? And especially are not. It's not going to be like a too speedy European Union, and can be travel also from the Schengen area, because I mean maybe countries refuse to accept people from countries which have really low rate of vaccination people.
No, well, I've seen some studies that show that there is quite a close correlation between trust in government and willingness to be vaccinated. So when people distrust their governments, then they're not willing to be vaccinated. I mean, if you look at Russia, so beyond the European Union, the trust in government is so low that I think the resistance against vaccination is, I don't know, something like 70 or 80%, really very, very high, very worrying. The rule of law and the fight against corruption, etc. It's always been one of my top priorities. You can see how it has a very direct effect if you have a government, and it doesn't matter whether it's left wing or right wing or centrist or whatever. If people have trust in the state and trust in government, they will be more willing to be vaccinated. So it's a matter of public health to fight against corruption.